The fog clung low to the ground, swallowing the horizon in a heavy silence. Men said the river carried whispers on nights like these, not the wind, not the water, but something older, something waiting. For generations, locals swore there were places you did not walk, paths you did not cross, and names you did not speak after dark. These weren't ghost stories told by children. They were warnings, carved into the marrow of every man who lived within reach of the bayou. Tonight, you're stepping into a history that was never meant to survive. A story of fathers and sons who turned survival into empire, empire into silence, and silence into fear. They called themselves nothing. The world called them nothing. But their neighbors called them hollow, and if the records are right, they're not gone. They're still here. Are you ready to hear the story history tried to bury? Before we dive in, a quick favor. This channel is built for those who crave the stories others are too afraid to tell, the ones whispered, not written. If you want more documentaries like this, hit subscribe and drop your state or country in the comments. I'd love to know where you're listening from. And if you think you'd sleep easy after tonight's story, you may want to think again. The river moved like a serpent beneath the fog, each ripple heavy with secrets, older than the men who worked its banks. At dawn, the silence was so complete it pressed against the skin, daring men to speak. Those who lived near the water learned never to trust its calm. Barges drifted soundlessly, their cargo disappearing without a trace. Men whispered that the current was not natural, that it devoured more than driftwood. It devoured men themselves. Travelers described lanterns swaying at impossible hours, pale lights bobbing through the fog where no ferrymen should have been. Men who followed those lights never returned. The river had rules, and breaking them meant vanishing forever. At the edge of the parish, an old hunter once warned younger men that sound carried differently near hollow land. Footsteps echoed longer, breathing felt louder. Every man sensed the unseen weight of eyes that did not belong to him. A ferryman named Samuel walked that bank in 1803, pulling his skiff into the shallows after a night spent fighting the current. He expected rest, perhaps a fire, but instead he heard the rhythm of shovels striking wet earth. Through the fog, 3 figures bent to their task. Their boots sank deep, water lapping at their knees. They did not speak. Their silence was heavier than the river itself, deliberate and practiced, a language older than words. Samuel crouched low in the reeds, forcing his breath shallow. He recognized 2 of the men from the hollow homestead, broad-shouldered workers known to haul timber. The third man stood taller, commanding without effort, his presence unmistakably different. The men hauled something from a wagon, dragging it toward the mud. At first, Samuel thought it grain sacks, but the weight sagged wrong. The shape folded upon itself, heavy, limp, disturbingly human. The splash was muffled as they heaved it into the shallows, followed by the grinding scrape of poles pressing down. The water churned briefly, then stilled. The body was gone, erased into the black veins of the river. Samuel gripped the reeds until his knuckles whitened. He had seen drownings before, but this was different. The precision unsettled him. It was not murder in rage, but disposal in practice, like farmers tending harvest rows. When the lanterns receded, Samuel dared push his skiff into the current again. His arms shook as he rowed, each pull dragging him farther from the scene, but the image burned into his mind refused to fade. That night, he did not return to his dock. Instead, he stopped at a tavern upriver, where men gathered in the dim glow of tallow candles. His voice shook as he described what he had witnessed among the reeds. The tavern grew quiet. Every man listening already suspected the hollow land was dangerous, but now suspicion became confirmation. Samuel's words gave weight to fear, a fear that had been gnawing silently at the edges of memory. The sheriff dismissed it as drunken talk, insisting the Hollow family were respectable farmers. But men in that room exchanged glances heavy with truth. Too many wagons had rolled through the swamp at night. Too many neighbors had vanished. From that night, Samuel was marked. His story spread like smoke, impossible to grasp, yet impossible to ignore. Men carried his words back to farms, markets, and camps, each retelling planting dread deeper in the parish soil. By winter, maps of silence formed. Men avoided hollow paths, refusing to fish near their bends of the river. Hunters steered clear of their fences, not from law, but from something more unspoken, something carved into instinct. Samuel himself grew quiet. Though he still ferried men across currents, his gaze never strayed from the horizon. Those who rode with him said he seemed older, as if the river had pressed decades into his bones. But silence only deepened curiosity. Men wondered why officials never intervened. They asked how a family could move wagons night after night without notice. Each question twisted into a sharper hook. Perhaps the hollows were not feared, but protected. Ledger fragments discovered decades later confirmed whispers of protection. Names of merchants, landowners, even officials were scrawled beside sums of silver. Men who should have enforced justice, instead, benefited from silence, their fortunes swelling as bodies vanished downstream. The hollows had transformed killing into structure, a rhythm as steady as farm chores. Men plowed fields by day, then disappeared rivals by night. Their barns held more than grain. They held contracts written in blood and secrecy. Cliffhangers struck whenever neighbors glanced at those barns. Diaries spoke of wagons moving with no horse strain, wheels dragging through mud as if burdened with stone. Men saw, but men did not ask. Silence ensured survival. By the spring of 1804, the killings had matured into enterprise. No longer desperate robberies, they were scheduled and methodical. A man could pay for disappearance as easily as he might pay for seed or lumber. One clerk's testimony revealed a deal in silver. A name whispered, and within weeks, the target was erased. No one questioned accidents when rivers ran high or when fever struck a household. Death blended seamlessly with nature. The Hollow's genius was their ability to disguise murder as misfortune. A man drowned on a calm river. Another fell from a horse. Another was consumed by sudden illness. Behind every fate was a hand pressing quietly. Soon the parish whispered that the Hollows kept ledgers of their contracts. Crude symbols marked names erased from memory. Each cross or circle represented another man folded into silence, his bloodline clipped like branches from a tree. The parish feared not only death, but invisibility. When a man was taken by the Hollows, his existence vanished with him. No grave, no testimony, just silence, heavy as fog, swallowing his place in the world. Samuel remained the unwanted witness, the man who had seen too much. His words sparked dread, but his survival reminded others that the Hollows tolerated silence, not betrayal. He lived only because he spoke in whispers, never shouts. Each year, the river carried more whispers. Merchants warned their sons never to stop near hollow fences. Hunters marked swamp paths as cursed ground. Yet the family continued unchallenged, each disappearance stitching their control tighter into the land. By 1806, rivals emerged, attempting to mimic the hollow enterprise. But they lacked the discipline of silence. Their killings were messy, their motives obvious. Soon their corpses floated in swamps, reminders that the Hollows tolerated no competition. The parish learned a brutal truth. Challenge the Hollow name, and you vanished. Fear spread not just of murder, but of the certainty of punishment. Men lowered their voices when speaking of rivals, never daring utter the forbidden name. Samuel aged, yet his account remained constant. Lanterns, poles, silence. He never embellished. That consistency gave his words the weight of iron. When men retold his story, they leaned closer, their eyes searching the shadows beyond the firelight. The legend rooted itself not through folklore but through dread. Each vanished neighbor became another branch of the hollow ledger. Each silence became proof. Soon men understood they lived not beside farmers, but beside architects of erasure. Every whistle through the swamp wind carried unease. Men swore they heard signals, long, low notes meant not for music, but for communication. Whistles that reminded them the hollows could summon shadows faster than neighbors could summon help. By 1810, the family had become more than killers. They were infrastructure, a system men could not resist without losing everything. They were invisible landlords of silence, shaping who thrived, who failed, and who simply never returned home. Suspense deepened when federal rumors surfaced. Marshals heard whispers of ledgers recording death with mathematical precision. But when officials ventured near, their paths dissolved into silence. Witnesses disappeared, files burned, and reports ended in sudden accidents no man could question. The hollow's greatest shield was the swamp itself. Fog erased tracks, water consumed evidence. Men who entered their grounds often failed to return. It was not wilderness, it was design. The swamp became their accomplice, swallowing history whole. Samuel's final years were spent rowing quietly, eyes fixed always on the water's edge. Men said he was haunted, yet his truth remained unbroken. He had seen the system, and he had lived to speak it. In the end, the parish remembered not Samuel's face but his words. Lanterns swaying low, poles pressing deep, silence heavier than stone. Each man who repeated them carried dread forward, ensuring the hollow name would never fade. The swamp no longer whispered only of fear, it whispered of profit. Men began to understand that what the Hollow family offered was not random violence, but service, a grim solution for problems unsolvable by courts. Contracts moved like shadows, spoken in taverns and exchanged in barns. A pouch of silver, a whispered name, and within days, a man disappeared. It was murder stripped of rage, dressed in business. One ledger fragment revealed crude marks beside initials, each symbol representing a man erased. A broken circle meant a drowned rival. A cross signaled a throat cut. Silver always balanced the page. The family perfected disguise. Deaths looked like accidents, river drownings, hunting mishaps, sudden fevers. But behind every accident was calculation, every misfortune arranged like a chess piece removed from a board without protest. Men found themselves tempted. A merchant crushed by debt, a planter desperate to silence a rival, a gambler ruined at cards. All saw the hollows as the silent tool of deliverance from shame. Suspense sharpened when stories spread of enemies vanishing overnight. A man would drink in a tavern one evening, confident, alive. By morning, his house stood silent, his body swallowed by swamp without trace. The hollows turned silence into currency. Respectable men paid them not only for erasure but for certainty. When they handled a rival, there were no witnesses, no survivors, nothing left to haunt the buyer. One merchant's clerk later admitted hearing his employer whisper a name. Within weeks, that rival fell dead from his horse. To townsfolk, it was fate. To the employer, it was money well spent. Men spoke of the hollows with a strange mix of terror and admiration. Their violence was invisible, their efficiency unmatched. To pay them was to erase trouble. To cross them was to vanish. Cliffhangers struck when rumors claimed the hollows themselves argued over pricing. Some demanded more silver, others accepted favors. Yet every deal ended the same way. A body lost, a ledger entry marked, silence purchased permanently. The swamp became an office, its mud the ink of contracts. Men who once hauled corn and timber now hauled rivals bound in sacks, their lanterns glowing faint against the fog. Each task professional, practiced. Every family member had a role. One gathered payments, one confirmed names, another disposed of bodies. It was routine, like farm labor. Except the harvest was not wheat. It was life itself harvested coldly. Suspicion grew when neighbors noticed patterns. Some deaths were too convenient, too beneficial to rivals. A store burned, a debtor drowned, a creditor vanished. Each event shifted power toward men who had once whispered with hollow intermediaries. A farmer once described seeing a wagon leave Hollowland at midnight. He swore it carried no grain. Wheels dragged heavy, burdened with something more final. By morning, another neighbor's field changed hands cheaply. The Hollows sold disappearance with chilling precision. To pay them was to buy silence. No sermons condemned them, no sheriffs intervened. It was as if law itself bent around their swamp, unwilling to trespass. Curiosity deepened when outsiders asked why no justice came. The truth was written in coin. Sheriffs, judges, and clerks benefited from silence. Silver spread like disease, each piece buying one more man's unwilling blindness. By 1805, the Hollows had mastered their trade. Men traveled from distant parishes seeking them, knowing contracts would be honored. Their farm became more than a home. It was a marketplace of death, hidden behind piety. Their brilliance was subtlety. Deaths appeared natural, timing perfect. Rivals disappeared on nights when the family attended church. Victims drowned when Hollow sons were seen trading in town. Their alibis were as strong as their blades. Hooks pulled men deeper when they realized how far the service spread. Traders along the river whispered names. Their rivals lost to storms that never came. Entire fortunes shifted through the quiet efficiency of swamp hands. Ledger fragments preserved later showed contracts spanning counties. Initials marked beside amounts of silver confirmed it. The Hollows were not improvising. They were managing. They had become administrators of death, scribes of silence itself. One chilling note described a planter purchasing erasure of a debtor. Days later, the debtor's household was found abandoned, supper still cooling. To neighbors, tragedy. To the planter, investment. To the Hollows, another balanced entry. The system expanded faster than rumors could contain. Merchants in Mississippi heard whispers. Politicians in Natchez listened with interest. The Hollows offered power without scandal, solutions without trial. Their silence became the most valuable commodity in the South. Cliffhanger rose when a wealthy man's rival drowned, though he had never learned to swim. Locals questioned the impossibility, but then remembered. The Hollows made impossibility their craft, turning contradictions into inevitability. Suspicion yielded only to fear. As their business grew, so did their arrogance. They no longer hid in shadows of barns. Their wagons moved openly at night. Men watched, but none intervened. To speak was to sign one's own contract. Men believed the swamp itself obeyed them. Bodies vanished too completely. Accidents unfolded too seamlessly. Some whispered that the river carried their secrets willingly, that even water feared their control. Fear became superstition. Superstition became silence. What made them invincible was structure. Unlike thieves or bandits, they planned, recorded, balanced. Each man in the family had purpose, discipline. To outsiders, they seemed like farmers. In truth, they were bookkeepers of blood. Suspense deepened when one neighbor found a page floating in the river, stained and torn. It bore initials beside crude marks. He kept it hidden, terrified, certain it was proof of the hollow ledger. He told no one, but carried the page until his death. His son discovered it years later, and by then the names belonged to men whose deaths had already slipped into folklore and whispered dread. Each transaction layered another brick into their empire. No court records existed, no testimony survived, but the pattern endured. A man with enemies could walk lighter, knowing the swamp carried allies as invisible as fog. Their methods spread beyond necessity. What began as survival during failed harvests became an industry. Men grew rich not on crops, but on silence. Every ledger page carried both silver and the absence of another man. The Hollow family discovered the truest form of control, fear woven with dependence. Men hated them, yet needed them. Every whisper of their name carried both a curse and a prayer, depending on who spoke it. Cliffhanger struck hardest when rivals considered forming alliances to resist. But alliances crumbled. Each man feared betrayal, knowing the Hollows could be hired against him. Suspicion paralyzed rebellion, ensuring the family's monopoly on erasure endured unchallenged. By the close of 1805, the parish no longer asked whether the Hollows killed. They asked only how much a disappearance cost. The question itself confirmed their power, placing value on life in silver measures. Samuel the ferryman, who had once spoken of bodies pressed into water, lived quietly, watching as his warning grew into empire. Men remembered his words, but they ignored them, too seduced by the lure of silence. The Hollows' business was not built on violence alone. It thrived on willingness. Men sought them willingly, silver clutched in fists, eyes darting nervously, mouths whispering names. Each deal deepened the swamp's hunger, each disappearance feeding empire. By then, the Hollow name was no longer rumor. It was ritual. Men feared it, men used it, men depended on it. Murder had been transformed into commerce, silence into wealth, fear into infrastructure. By 1806, the Hollow family stood at the height of their power, their ledgers filled, their services sought by men across the bayou. Yet power never remains unchallenged for long. Rivals always emerge. Whispers of their methods spread, carried downriver by merchants and boatmen. Other families heard and saw opportunity. They believed they too could profit from organized disappearance. Their imitations were crude, but ambition alone made them dangerous. The first challenge came from the Duval clan. They were brash, their killings messy, their motives obvious. But for some men in desperate need, price mattered more than subtlety. The Duvals charged less, demanding only loyalty. For a short time, they prospered. Merchants burdened with debt, planters cornered by rivals, even parish officials desperate for silence turned to them. The bayou felt divided, its shadows contested. The Hollows could not allow this insult. They responded with patience. Instead of striking openly, they infiltrated the Duval ranks. Contracts began to fail. Rivals survived accidents that should have killed them. Ambushes collapsed, leaving Duval men dead in the swamps they thought safe. One by one, the Duvals disappeared. Some strangled in taverns, others drowned during routine crossings. To outsiders, it looked like misfortune. To those who understood, it was the Hollows reminding everyone that precision always triumphs over noise. The final blow came in 1807. The Duval patriarch vanished with his sons during a transport through the basin. Their boat was later found adrift, cargo intact, but every man gone, erased as if swallowed by fog. The parish whispered, but did not mourn. Their silence was relief. The Hollows had proven there was room for only one empire. Competing with them was not business. It was suicide written in swamp mud. Suspense deepened as other small families considered imitation. But the message was clear. Challenge the Hollows and you vanish. The monopoly was restored, forged not only through silver, but through ruthless extermination of competition. Fear grew heavier. Men realized they were surrounded by forces they could not see, a battlefield without banners, where every step might trespass invisible lines. The bayou was no longer wild land. It was territory. Travelers avoided certain routes. Hunters shifted grounds. Even merchants locked doors earlier, knowing the shadows belonged to someone else. The Hollows ruled without proclamation, their authority written not in law, but in whispered survival. One diary described it best. The parish is stitched by borders no map records. Men knew the lines. They walked around them, never across. To forget them meant vanishing before another sunrise. Hooks pulled deeper when outsiders arrived. Traders from Mississippi noticed the silence, the caution, the absence of rebellion. They asked who ruled here. The answer was never spoken aloud. It floated in the fog like ash. The Hollows expanded beyond Louisiana, but first they ensured their monopoly at home was absolute. Each rival attempt collapsed. Each rumor of competition ended with bodies weighted underwater, faces never seen again by morning light. Men admired the precision even as they feared it. They spoke in taverns of the family's brilliance, their ability to erase rivals without witnesses. Admiration and terror mingled until respect became indistinguishable from dread. Suspense peaked when one ambitious clan from upriver attempted to negotiate instead of compete. They sent envoys with offers of shared profit. None returned. Their bones likely fed the same mud that silenced countless victims. From that point forward, no family dared copy them. The Hollows had established not only business but dominion. They were not killers for hire. They were an institution, a power structure greater than courts or churches. Men in power began to rely on them even more. With no rivals, the family could dictate price. Silver poured into their barns, buying disappearances as quickly as seed buys harvest. Their monopoly was absolute. Cliffhanger arrived when whispers spread that the family sought not only silver, but favors. Judges who erased records, sheriffs who looked away, merchants who funneled grain. The empire was no longer about killing. It was about influence. By 1808, their reputation had crossed the Mississippi. Natchez, perched high above the river, was rife with powerful men desperate for silence. The Hollows became their shadow allies, erasing rivals with surgical precision. Expansion had begun. But expansion brought new risks. The more men vanished, the harder it became to disguise accidents. Some suspected a hidden hand, yet none dared name it. To name it aloud was to invite annihilation. Men described the bayou as haunted, though not by spirits. It was haunted by certainty. If a man crossed the Hollows, his end was guaranteed. No ghost carried more fear than living precision. Every rival who tried to rise was buried. Every competitor who whispered of contracts was silenced. The Hollow monopoly extended beyond economics. It became psychological, a weight pressing into every man who dared imagine rebellion. Suspense grew when a rumor surfaced that one Duval's son had survived hidden by allies. He never appeared. Some claimed the Hollows let whispers of his survival spread only to remind men that hope itself could vanish. The silent war ended not with battle but with silence so heavy it crushed memory. The Hollows proved that dominance required no armies, only patience, precision, and the ability to erase rivals completely. Hooks deepened when merchants realized the family's monopoly meant they could shape markets. A planter's rival could vanish, altering land ownership. A merchant's competitor could drown, changing trade. Entire economies bent around swamp silence. The parish no longer viewed the family as criminals. They viewed them as inevitable. To live in the bayou meant to exist under their shadow. Men adapted, as they always did, by choosing silence. One surviving testimony called them architects of invisibility. They built nothing tangible, yet their control was stronger than stone. Their territory stretched unseen, a fortress without walls, defended by fear rather than steel. Cliffhanger struck as federal whispers reached New Orleans. Reports spoke of organized disappearance, ledgers of death, a family wielding silence like a weapon. Yet every marshal who ventured close returned empty, or did not return at all. The Hollows anticipated every move. Their rivals were gone, their monopoly secure, their reach expanding into neighboring states. The silent war was their triumph. It cemented them as something more than men. They were institution. Yet victory carried its own danger. Power attracts attention. Attention invites scrutiny. The Hollows had won their war in silence, but the echoes of that silence were growing too loud for the outside world to ignore. And as history shows, empires that rise through silence eventually face the moment when silence cannot protect them. For the Hollows, that reckoning would come not from rivals, but from men beyond their swamp borders. By 1810, the Hollows had silenced rivals and cemented dominance at home. But power never rests. Their ambition stretched beyond parish lines, reaching into Mississippi, Natchez, and every man who traded along the river. The river became their highway, its fog shielding wagons heavy with coin and bodies alike. To most men, it was a lifeline. To the Hollows, it was a bridge to expansion and unseen influence. Natchez welcomed them silently. The city was a fortress of wealth, where men with power faced rivals daily. The Hollows arrived not with noise, but with precision, offering solutions no law could provide. Their reputation preceded them. Men whispered of contracts fulfilled without error, rivals erased without trace. The merchants of Natchez, accustomed to scandal, now saw an opportunity for silence that even politics could not tarnish. The Hollows embedded themselves not through force but through necessity. Powerful men leaned on them, desperate to maintain order. Soon, disappearance was currency, traded as casually as tobacco or cotton. Fear became investment, silence became stability. Suspense deepened as evidence emerged of hollow influence in courtrooms. Witnesses vanished before trials began. Judges lost rivals through sudden accidents. Each disappearance shifted outcomes, each outcome reinforcing the family's growing empire of unseen hands. Men admired their precision. They did not storm cities or demand titles. They bent institutions by erasing obstacles, ensuring allies thrived. Their empire was invisible, yet its shadow fell over trade routes and government chambers alike. Hooks sharpened when traders realized the Hollows no longer served just men in the bayou. They now managed silence for governors, planters, and merchants. They were no longer hunters of rivals. They were architects of society. Ledger fragments showed payments that dwarfed parish sums. Entire plantations changed hands after disappearances. Fortunes were secured with silver delivered at night. Each entry in the ledger carried consequences far beyond a single vanishing man. The family adapted. Their barns became vaults of silver, their wagons fortified. Guards watched roads not for intruders but for betrayal. They had moved from secrecy to administration, ruling like unseen governors of trade. Suspense peaked when whispers spread of federal men watching Natchez. Yet each investigator found little. Witnesses evaporated. Contracts burned. The Hollows anticipated moves before they were made. Their empire thrived because silence killed truth faster than bullets. Men began describing them not as killers, but as shadow bankers. They lent silence instead of coin. Repayment came through favors, land, or loyalty. Each man who used them became bound, forever owned by obligation. Cliffhanger struck when a politician's rival drowned days before an election. Voters whispered, but ballots carried the survivor to power. That politician owed his life to swamp silence. His allegiance deepened their hold over institutions. By 1812, their influence stretched far beyond Louisiana. Riverboats carried more than goods. They carried contracts whispered in shadows. Men in St. Louis and Memphis spoke of the family, though none dared utter their name aloud. The swamp-born killers had become empire builders. Their reach extended through law, commerce, and politics. They no longer needed to lift blades themselves. Others carried fear for them, spreading silence like an infection. Suspense deepened when an entire ledger was rumored to exist, documenting every disappearance, every payment, every favor. If found, it could topple politicians, merchants, even judges. Yet the ledger never surfaced, as if swallowed by swamp. Merchants swore that ledgers were hidden in hollowed beams of barns. Others claimed they were buried in barrels under river mud. But none dared search. Men feared knowledge itself, for knowledge meant certain erasure. Their empire was not guarded by armies, but by terror. Men protected them willingly, desperate to preserve their own survival. No walls surrounded their land. Fear itself was the strongest fortress, impregnable and eternal. By now, the Hollows were untouchable. Every disappearance reinforced their inevitability. Every silence confirmed their dominance. Men looked to them not as criminals, but as essential architects of order. Their shadows had replaced the need for law. Cliffhanger came when whispers spread of expansion into Mississippi politics. Rivals of senators disappeared. Votes shifted. Power realigned. The hollows no longer haunted only backwaters. They had entered the chambers of power, unseen but undeniable. Men who used them could never sever ties. Every silver coin paid, every rival vanished, was a chain binding them tighter. No man stood independent once he whispered a name into hollow ears. Their empire thrived on dependency. To resist them was impossible. To ignore them was suicidal. Men adapted by embracing them, bowing to their silence, weaving fear into the fabric of everyday life. Suspense sharpened when federal officers attempted infiltration. Informants vanished before reporting. Couriers drowned before delivering. Every attempt collapsed into silence. Men began to suspect federal agents themselves were compromised, silver binding their loyalty tighter than law. By 1815, their reach had extended across borders. River trade carried their contracts as far as New Orleans, where merchants swore allegiance silently. No ship docked, no cargo moved, without their shadow brushing against it. The Hollows learned that true empire did not require crowns or flags. It required control of men's fears. A crown can be toppled. Fear cannot. Their rule endured because it was unseen yet absolute. Hooks pulled deeper when rumors spread of entire bloodlines erased, not just men, but sons, cousins, brothers. Contracts reached deeper, ensuring rivals could never rise again. This was not business. This was generational extermination disguised as commerce. The family's barns overflowed with silver, yet it was never enough. Silver was fuel, but influence was power. Their empire thrived not on wealth but on leverage, owning men who could never repay silence. Suspense sharpened when one politician attempted defiance, refusing further payment. Days later, his brother drowned in a dry ditch, his cousin vanished on a hunting trip, his son collapsed from sudden fever. Defiance ended in submission. By now, the hollow name was sacred and cursed alike. Sacred to those who thrived from their services, cursed to those erased by them. Every whisper of their name carried dread heavier than stone. Cliffhanger struck as rumors spread of their expansion into banking itself. Silver flowed through institutions in Natchez and Memphis. Men wondered if even banks were hollow-owned, laundering silence through ledgers cleaner than any court document. By the late 1810s, they had become empire, not family. No court record bore their name, yet every man of influence knew them. They were shadow monarchs, crowned not with jewels, but with silence itself. Every rival long gone, every competitor buried, every politician indebted. The hollow empire of shadows stretched across states, unseen, unchallenged. And yet, in every rise lies the seed of downfall, waiting in silence to bloom. The Hollow family had mastered commerce in silence, but their ambitions shifted toward permanence. Silver was fleeting, power was fragile, but bloodlines carried weight. They no longer hunted only men. They hunted memory itself. Contracts began extending beyond rivals. Entire households became targets. Brothers vanished together. Sons disappeared on hunting trips. Cousins drowned in shallow creeks. The purpose was not removal of one man, but extermination of an entire line. Ledger fragments revealed marks unlike earlier contracts. Where once initials stood alone, now clusters of symbols indicated families, their branches systematically clipped. It was not murder for hire anymore. It was annihilation by design. Suspense sharpened when merchants realized disappearance meant more than rivalry erased. It meant history erased. Without sons, without heirs, names dissolved, estates fell silent, swallowed by the swamp and absorbed by those aligned with the hollows. The family understood that to control the future, One must destroy the past. Silver purchased erasure, but erasure left permanent scars. Entire surnames vanished from parish records as if never carved into life at all. Hooks pulled men deeper when rumors spread of sacred grounds within Hollow Land. These were not graves, but erasure fields, where generations were buried together. No marker, no cross, just silence pressed deep beneath mud. Travelers swore they heard muffled hammering at night, as if timbers were being nailed. Some believed barns hid more than grain. Beneath their floors, beneath their walls, entire family lines lay sealed into darkness. Suspense grew when one mapmaker described riding through the parish and noticing entire homesteads empty. He marked them, but weeks later, his maps were confiscated. The Hollows controlled not only land, but memory itself. Men began to fear lineage. To be noticed by the family meant not only your death, but your sons' deaths, your brothers' deaths, your cousins erased until nothing remained of your blood. Ledger symbols became darker. Accounts bore marks resembling trees, each branch crossed out one by one. The Hollows were recording not payments, but extinctions. They measured power not in coin, but in absence. Hooks deepened as survivors whispered of men taken alive, bound and carted toward hollow grounds. They were never seen again, no screams carried. The swamp muffled everything. The silence was the only witness. Some called it purification, others called it extermination. Either way, the Hollows were ensuring no rival could ever return, no son could avenge, no cousin could rebuild. They erased possibilities before they ever existed. Suspense peaked when a parish clerk uncovered missing records of entire families. Births struck from ledgers. Land deeds vanished. It was as if ink itself obeyed hollow command, erasing history while silver clinked in barns. Every man feared that erasure. Death was tolerable. Memory erased was unthinkable. To live on in sons, in nephews, in names etched into records was all men hoped for. The Hollows cut even that hope. Cliffhanger struck when word spread of a plantation owner whose household was wiped out overnight. He, his brothers, his sons, every male kin vanished. By dawn, his land passed into another man's hands effortlessly. The Hollow Empire thrived because erasure became more valuable than killing. To pay them was to guarantee not just removal of a rival, but removal of his entire legacy. Power shifted with terrifying permanence. Travelers whispered that Hollow Land contained pits so deep they swallowed generations. Lanterns glowed through fog as wagons unloaded more than bodies. They unloaded history, folded into the swamp, erased before it could be remembered. Suspense grew when officials noticed census gaps. Families recorded one year disappeared the next without reason. Names vanished from tax rolls, properties absorbed by neighbors aligned with hollow influence. The parish was rewriting itself in silence. One surviving page described 3 generations erased in weeks. Grandfather, son, and grandson, each marked with symbols. Silver paid once, bloodlines ended forever. It was extermination, efficient as farming, the swamp's harvest measured in absence. Hooks tightened when whispers claimed the Hollows celebrated these erasures with feasts. Men swore they saw fires glowing from their land, shadows moving around barns, not in grief, but in triumph. Death itself had become ritual. By 1815, bloodline extermination had become their defining weapon. No rival dared cross them, not only for fear of personal death, but for fear that every son, every cousin, would vanish into mud. Suspense sharpened when a judge aligned against them found his entire kin erased. Brothers drowned, nephews strangled, cousins vanished. His own body was discovered weeks later in river reeds. His lineage ended, his opposition erased permanently. The Hollow family had discovered the truest form of empire, generational dominance. Men ruled through sons and heirs. The Hollows ruled by removing them. Their ledger was not commerce anymore. It was a blueprint for extinction. Cliffhanger emerged when whispers claimed their barns held walls carved with names of erased families. No man dared confirm it, but travelers swore they saw etchings through cracks, scratched letters fading in torchlight. Men feared inheritance itself. To hold land meant drawing hollow attention. To be noticed was death. Survival required allegiance, not ambition. Only those bound by fear and silence lived to see their names survive. Suspense peaked when merchants in Natchez admitted contracts now included family erasure clauses. For a higher price, not one rival but every blood relative could be removed. Death had become scalable, a service extended across generations. Ledger fragments revealed symbols for these contracts. Entire branches marked through. One payment ensuring extinction. It was control more absolute than any bullet. It was the end of history, written in swamp mud. Hooks pulled tighter when whispers spread of men returning to their homes and finding sons gone, cousins vanished, brothers missing. No trace remained, only the echo of boots in mud and silence heavy as fog. The parish grew quieter with every year. Once bustling households stood abandoned, fields grew wild, the map itself was shrinking, whole names cut from memory. The hollows were not just killing men, they were redrawing existence. Suspense sharpened as federal whispers reached the swamp again. Officials sought records, proof of erasure. But witnesses vanished, clerks drowned, ledgers burned. Evidence itself could not survive. Truth was consumed, leaving only rumor and fear. One diary captured the dread. The hollows do not kill men, they kill names, they kill tomorrow. It was not just death, it was exile from history itself, written in silence. Cliffhanger arrived as rumors spread of entire shipments of bodies buried together. Men claimed they saw wagons dragging chains of kin, each bound to ensure nothing remained. It was extermination industrialized, perfected into rhythm. By 1818, their control was absolute. Bloodlines erased, rivals exterminated, records destroyed. The Hollows had built an empire of silence that spanned generations. Their legacy was not silver. It was absence, crafted as carefully as stone. Every man understood the truth. To cross them meant not just death, but the death of one's entire memory. No legacy, no name, no inheritance. Erasure was the Hollows' final currency, and they spent it freely. By the 1820s, the Hollow Empire was vast, silent, and seemingly untouchable. They had erased rivals, exterminated bloodlines, and bound officials to silence. Yet history proves that shadows cannot remain forever hidden. Attention eventually arrives. Federal whispers carried tales of the swamp family that managed death like commerce. Reports trickled through courtrooms, incomplete, fragmented. Marshals sent to investigate either vanished or returned with nothing but silence stitched into their eyes. Men spoke of files burned, testimonies drowned. It seemed truth itself could not survive their reach. Yet curiosity spread beyond parish borders. The more silence grew, the more the outside world demanded answers. Suspense deepened when an officer from New Orleans attempted to chart parish deaths. His records showed patterns too precise, too impossible to ignore. Before he could testify, he drowned during a stormless night crossing. His files vanished. The Hollows anticipated scrutiny. They had survived by erasing evidence as efficiently as they erased men. Ledgers disappeared into flames. Witnesses dissolved into mud. Every attempt to expose them collapsed into silence, leaving only rumors alive. Hooks pulled tighter when journalists began probing. Articles hinted at organized disappearances, silent killings disguised as accidents. But presses mysteriously broke, editors vanished, and entire stacks of newspapers burned. Truth was smothered before it could breathe. By 1830, whispers described them as myth. Officials declared the family exaggerated folklore, But men who lived near the swamp knew better. They remembered neighbors erased, rivals exterminated, and silence heavier than any government denial. Cliffhanger struck when a federal marshal disappeared during daylight. His horse returned, saddle intact, but rider gone. It proved no hour, no uniform, no authority could shield men once the family chose erasure. The swamp remained their shield. Fog devoured tracks, water erased trails, and silence cloaked every crime. Investigators realized they were not fighting men alone. They were fighting geography weaponized into permanence by hands practiced in disappearance. Suspense sharpened when an entire court case dissolved after witnesses drowned within weeks of each other. Juries never heard evidence. Judges dismissed cases for lack of testimony. Justice itself was rewritten by swamp silence. By mid-century, families across states whispered of hollow contracts. Some called them ghosts, others called them shadows. Yet men knew they were real because rivals still vanished, bloodlines still ended, and silver still flowed quietly. Hooks deepened when records of property transfers revealed gaps too wide to ignore. Entire estates changed hands without heirs contesting. Clerks scratched through missing names, filing silence as neatly as deeds, their pens as complicit as blades. The hollow story became untouchable in official histories. Schools omitted them, courts denied them, but taverns, porches, and river docks preserved them in whispers, handed from father to son like warnings carved into bone. Cliffhanger emerged when one priest dared mention them in a sermon. Days later, he vanished. His church remained locked, his name struck from rolls. Silence consumed even men of faith, proving no voice could outlast swamp shadow. By the 1850s, railroads carved through states, carrying new men with new ambitions. Yet even they heard whispers. Locals warned them never to wander near hollow land. Old names lingered in fear, carried forward in silence. Suspense sharpened when one surveyor stumbled upon bones in swamp mud, stacked unnaturally. He reported them. Days later, his body surfaced downstream. The bones were gone, moved deeper, silence swallowing evidence as if the earth obeyed. Hooks pulled tighter when rumors spread that descendants of the family still moved among men, disguised, nameless, yet powerful. Merchants claimed deals sealed with silence echoed old patterns. Disappearances in new towns resembled the swamp's rhythm. The Civil War distracted many, but in its aftermath, men once again noticed strange vanishings. Soldiers turned deserters disappeared in swamps. Rivals in Reconstruction politics drowned suddenly. The hollow system had survived upheaval, adapting to new shadows. Cliffhanger came when census workers in 1870 noted unexplained absences. Entire names missing, properties abandoned, lines erased. The same rhythm persisted. It seemed the swamp itself ensured their legacy endured, untouched by war or progress. By the 1900s, academics dismissed them as folklore. Yet every generation of men near the swamp carried stories of wagons at midnight, of lanterns swaying low, of silence too heavy for coincidence. Suspense deepened as DNA studies in modern times uncovered unrecorded gaps. Genetic lines abruptly ended, families extinguished. Scientists could not explain it fully, but locals whispered the explanation had always been carved in hollow silence. Hooks sharpened when divers explored forgotten channels of the river, unearthing chains tangled in roots. Some claimed they saw initials carved faintly into rusted metal. They returned shaken, swearing they would never step in swamp water again. Cliffhanger struck as rumors spread of hidden ledgers resurfacing. One collector claimed to hold pages marked with symbols of erasure. Days later, his house burned to ash. The pages vanished. Silence, once again, devoured proof. By the 2000s, documentaries and journalists revisited the story, yet each effort faltered. Sources vanished, footage corrupted, files lost. It seemed the curse of erasure persisted, extending the hollow hand into the modern age. Suspense grew as men swore descendants still walked among them, powerful yet invisible, their silence woven into corporations and courts. Every sudden scandal erased, every rival ruined, carried echoes of swamp precision disguised as progress. Hooks tightened when one archivist admitted finding census anomalies too exact to dismiss. Names vanished in clusters, records erased in patterns. He whispered, "It was not oversight, it was design." Days later, he resigned without explanation. The hollow name had never been officially recorded, yet it never died. It survived in whispers, in warnings, in dread passed from fathers to sons who knew silence carried heavier truth than history books. Cliffhanger emerged when men swore they still heard whistles in the swamp at night. Long, low signals moving through fog, the same calls their ancestors described, summoning shadows long after the family was thought gone. By now, the hollow story was no longer just history. It was folklore, curse, and warning. Men who knew it never spoke openly, fearing to invite silence upon themselves. Fear preserved it better than ink. Suspense deepened as technology advanced. Satellites mapped the swamp, but no image captured its secrets. Ground-penetrating radar revealed voids under soil, yet expeditions returned empty. Even machines could not pierce what silence had claimed. Hooks pulled men deeper when one genealogist admitted entire surnames vanished inexplicably. He called it the erased bloodlines. His report circulated briefly, then disappeared from archives. His name, too, dissolved from academic circles. Cliffhanger struck when modern lawmen admitted cold cases matched hollow methods. Victims drowned on calm waters. Rivals collapsed suddenly. Files ended abruptly. It was as if the family's rhythm had survived, migrating into unseen corridors of power. The Hollows had achieved immortality not through monuments, but through silence. Their story was too evil for history books, too dangerous for courts, too heavy for records. Yet it persisted, whispered in shadows men still feared. Suspense sharpened as men wondered if silence itself was their truest descendant. Every vanished name, every erased record, every broken witness created a legacy larger than empire. The hollow inheritance was absence, eternal and undefeated. Hooks pulled at memory when fathers warned sons to avoid the swamp at night. They repeated what Samuel the ferryman once whispered, "Lanterns in fog mean death." That warning never faded, never weakened across generations. The story endured because it could not be buried. The Hollows erased rivals, bloodlines, evidence, and history, yet they could never erase fear. Fear kept their memory alive, unbroken, a curse carved into silence.